This is a CS Plus production brought to you by Baldwin Wallace University.
All right, welcome to our next tech camp. In this camp, what we're going to be doing is kind of extending off of our previous camp where we made music with Sonic Pi, and now we're actually going to be making a music player. So kind of think maybe like a Spotify or a Pandora, something like that. We're going to work on. We're going to make it fairly simple at the beginning, but then we'll add some complexity and some cool features to it. So if you're new to our tech camps and you haven't participated before and had a coding window set up before, we do have an instructional video that just kind of sets you up using a code editor and then a web browser, and that's what we'll be doing today. So we'll have this link down here below in the video that you can follow to get set up first. But the first thing that we want to do is have that code editor up and running. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. And so I'm going to go to File, New File. And then by default, if we start adding some code in here, we're not going to get the syntax highlighting that we're used to getting in our other camps. So, if I put an HTML tag in here, you'll notice that it doesn't do the syntax highlighting. So I want that to pop up for me to kind of help us along here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file. And so I can just go to File and then Save. And then when I save this, I can save it anywhere. I'm just going to save it to our desktop. And I'm going to call this music player.html. It's important that we add that .html extension at the end because if we don't have that, it may not recognize the syntax that we're going to have in here. So once I add that in here, you'll notice that it recognizes it as an HTML file, and it also color-coded this tag here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this window to where I have my code on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to open that HTML file. So I'm going to use Firefox, but you can use whatever browser you have on your computer. And then I'm just going to split these side by side. And again, we have this in our instructional video. So in case you're not familiar with how to do that, I would pause this video and then go over and then watch that one. Now, once we have this up and running, what we want to do is we want to build out this web page. So it's going to be a web-based music player. And we're going to take some songs that we created from the previous camp using Sonic Pi. So the first thing that we want to do when we start off with an HTML document is we want to add some of the basic tags here. So the way that HTML works is it uses something called the tag structure. So the way that a tag works is you always have a less than sign, the name of the tag, and then a greater than sign. Now you'll notice that Visual Studio Code automatically added this close tag for me. The only difference between an open and close tag is you'll notice that the close tag has a / right before the name of the tag. Okay, so right before HTML, we have this / here. That just indicates that this tag closes here. Now, all that this really means is it's a sense of a hierarchy of when we put elements in here, where they belong. So this HTML tag says I have an HTML document, and what I put in here is going to be part of that. If you think about like a document, if you ever did like a report in school, you probably had a header and then you had a body in that document. So I'm going to add a head tag here, and you'll notice it automatically adds that open and close tag, or the close tag there. And then I'm going to add a body tag. So the way that it's going to work is that the head tag is going to contain styling information or information about our web page, and the body tag will actually have the content. And we can actually see this here. Let's just do a quick demo. So I'm going to add a title tag here, and that's going to be contained within my head tag. So we already kind of see this hierarchy. Within the HTML tag, I have a head tag. Within the head tag, I have a title tag. So in this title, I'm going to give my music player a name. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it CS Plus Tunes. And I'm going to save this. Now you'll notice if I don't save it, you'll see that white circle there in my IDE. Once I save it, that will go away, and that kind of tells me that the code was saved. So this is really important because as we write our code here and we go to our browser to refresh it to see if it updated, we want to make sure that it indeed saved. Because otherwise, if we go over here and refresh, but we forgot to save our changes, we won't see those updates. So there's a couple ways to save. You could just go to File and then Save. But if you're on a Mac, you can just do Command S to save. Or if you're on Windows, you can hold down Control and then hit S to save. And so sometimes it's a little bit faster as you're getting used to the keyboard and the different shortcuts. But either way will work. So once I have that in there, though, I'm going to go back over here. And I'm going to click the refresh button. And just as you can imagine, if we have a shortcut for save, we also have a shortcut for refresh. So just like Control S is to save here on Windows, Control R will refresh on Windows in our browser. But you can also just click the button if you like to use the mouse. And you'll notice that up here, I got my CS Plus tunes. And you should have whatever you put in your title here. Now, that's great that we got that title up there, but I actually want to add something in the body of the page. So something I would actually see here. So let's go ahead and add an H1 tag. And that H1 stands for header. So we got a level 1 heading tag here. So this is going to be the largest header that we can have in HTML without adding additional styling. So I'm just going to kind of repeat the text here in our title. I'll add CS Plus tunes. And then I just want to do a quick save over here. So I'll do my Command S. I'll go over here and I'll actually do a Command R. And I see that right away. Again, you could do the file save or click the refresh. But I'll just use the keyboard shortcut just to make it a little bit easier. But there we see our CS Plus tunes. Underneath that, I'm going to add a P tag. And a P tag is for a paragraph. And so I'm actually going to add a space in here. And it's okay to have this indentation and white space. It helps us figure out the structure of the document. And I'm going to put some sort of catchphrase or something to help market our music player. So your favorite music right here for you. I'm going to save that. Again, jump over, refresh, and there we see that change. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't like the way that this text looks. I want something that doesn't look maybe so much like a newspaper. So just like how we have HTML, which defines the structure of the document, I'm just going to resize this so we can fit a little bit more code in here. We have a different type of language, totally separate from HTML, which defines the style of the document. So within this head tag, I'm going to add a style tag. And in this style tag, what I want to do is I want to change that font. So I'm not a big fan of, this is a font called Times New Roman. I'm personally not a big fan, but maybe you are, so you can leave it if you'd like. But what we're going to do is we're going to add some styling code in here to change the style of this web page. So the way that this works is we first have to specify a selector. So what component are we going to change the style of? So here I'm actually going to say the entire body, so our entire HTML document. So what I put in here will apply to everything in the HTML document. So I'm going to type in that body tag, that's my selector. I'm going to do an open curly brace, which will automatically add my closed curly brace here. And I'm just going to hit enter in between there so it's on a new line. Just going to help out with the formatting. If you haven't used that curly brace yet, it's next to the P key, and you just hold down Shift, and that will create it for you. Once we have that, I'm going to actually change the background color first. I'm going to go with kind of like a dark mode here. So I'm going to type in background. And you notice that as I type this out, the IDE, Visual Studio Code, is helping me out here. It's giving me all these different options of things I can change in my document. But I'm just going to do background color for now. And I'm going to specify a color. And the way I'm going to specify that color is I'm going to use RGB values. So RGB meaning red, green, blue. I could type out one of these colors that they have here, but I want to be a little bit more specific. So the way that this works is when we provide an RGB color, we can provide a number from 0 to 255. The reason why it's up to 255 is because you may have heard this term before, but a byte, we can hold any number from 0 to 255 in a byte. So we use a byte for the red color, a byte for the green color, and a byte for the blue color. And just as you can imagine, if you mix these colors together, you can make some really interesting colors. I'm just going to make a dark gray here. And so I'm going to give them all an equal value, but a fairly low value. And you can see it gives us kind of a preview here. So we can see that that's a dark gray. So I'm going to save that and go back over here and refresh. I'm going to have kind of like a dark mode for my music player. But if you notice, we really can't see that text there. It's black, but it's very subtle. You can't really see it. So I'm actually going to change the color for the text. Now background color will change the background color. To change the color of the text, it's really easy. Actually, we just include color. And for that color, I'm again going to specify an RGB. Now I could do 100% white. So I'm going to do 255, 255, 255, because that's the max color I can use for each channel, the max value. And if I save that and go back and refresh, it's a really bright white, but it might be too much of a contrast. So I'm actually going to lower it a little bit. I'm just going to drop it down to 200. And feel free to play with these colors. Get creative. If you want to do something that might have like a tint of blue, you could raise this background color up a little bit. And you'll notice that, oh, I did the wrong one. Well, that's a tint of red. So it's RGB. So if I want a little bit of blue, I would just raise this up a little bit. And then I kind of have like a dark blue background. But I'm going to go back to that dark gray. So I got dark gray here, and then now my text here isn't as bright. It's kind of a softer white, maybe a little bit easier on the eyes. Now, I want to come back to why I came to change initially, and that is the font. So we don't want it to be a Times New Roman. So I'm going to change the font to be something a little bit softer, not so sharp around the edges. So I'm going to specify the font family. And in this font family, we can use any kind of font that we have installed on our computer. This gets a little tricky when we build a web page, because when we use a font, we have to make sure that the person that's viewing the page has it installed on their system. Otherwise, it won't show. But if we use Arial, there's a certain amount of web-safe fonts, and Arial is one of those that most people would have it installed on their computer. So I'm going to add Arial there. And if I save that, jump back, refresh, notice how it kind of softened out the text a little bit. It's not as sharp around the edges. The other thing too is I don't like this text being right up against this edge here on this left edge or this top edge. And so if you think about if you were to ship something or maybe pack something that might be a little fragile, you would put padding into it. And it really works the same way in HTML. So we can think of this as a box. And if we want to add space between the edge of that box to the content on the inside, well, we can just add padding. So I'm going to add some padding in here. And we can specify it using different units. I'm going to specify it using pixels. So I'm going to do 15 pixels. And if I save that and I refresh, you'll notice that this will pad from the top and from the left. So we get a little space there. Now the other thing is we could specify that padding to be a separate value for the top, the left, the bottom, and the right. You have a lot of control with that, but we'll just leave it as padding all around. Now, while I have padding in this web page, I want to take that player and kind of put it in its own box. And the way that we could do that is we could use something called a div tag. So in my body down here, I'm going to add a div tag. And this is going to be a little bit newer, but before I create that greater than sign or add that greater than sign to create the tag, I'm going to add an attribute to this HTML. So the way the attributes work is they come usually in key value pairs. So our key here will be ID, and then the value of that ID is what we'll type in here. I'm going to give it an ID of player. So think of it as ID, it's an identifier, and so it should be unique in our HTML document. So meaning that we shouldn't have another div tag or even an h1 tag that has an ID of player. So I'm going to create that greater than sign now. It automatically adds that close tag for us, and I'm going to right click on that and cut it. And now I'm going to drop it right below the P tag here, and I'll paste that in. And I'm just going to fix the indentation. It just kind of helps me be able to read this HTML document a little bit easier. So I'm going to highlight the tags inside that div tag and just hit the tab key, and that will bump it out. Now, even though we added that div tag here, if I save that and I go back and I refresh, you won't really notice much of a difference. But we're going to add some styling to this to actually see a difference. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and add some styling to that. So we can add styling based on the tag, or we can also add it based on the ID. So if we want to select that ID, we can't just type in player because it would look for a player tag, which we don't have. I'm going to do a hashtag for that ID and then type in player. Now that we have that player selector there, I'm going to add some styling to this. So within our music player, I want to have a border around it so we can actually see that this is the music player component on our web page. So I'm going to add a border to it. So I'm going to do border colon, and then I'm going to specify I want to have a solid border, and I want it to be maybe 1 pixel wide. And I'll do a color of it with RGB. I want it to actually match my text. So I'll do RGB 200, 200, 200. And so even with just that, if I save that and I go back and refresh, you notice we have a border around it. Now, just like with our body tag, I don't want that text to be right on that border. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some padding to this. I'll save that, come back, refresh. We see it bumped out a little bit. And the other thing is, I don't like the sharp edges on this border. So I'm going to round them off a little bit. Now, before, this used to be a difficult task, but in CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, we can specify a border radius. So we can round off these corners. So I'm going to add a border radius, and I'm going to do 25%. Now that might be a little bit too much, so I can also decrease it too. I might actually use a pixel value here. I might try our trusty old 15 pixels and do that. Now we got a nice rounded border. But you can see the kind of effect that you can do by adding a larger value or a percentage. So this looks a lot better. Now, for some of you watching, this may seem, well, this is kind of bland. We just have a dark gray, a really soft white. Feel free to experiment with the colors. So maybe you want to have a border that is maybe a little bit brighter, maybe a bright green. So if we were to do, take down the red value, I can increase that green value, and I can take away the blue. So anytime I got 0, that means I'm not going to show any of that color. So if I save that and go back and refresh, now we got kind of like a bright green neon color there. The other thing too is maybe you want that border to be thicker. Well, with the border here, I got it as 1 pixel. You can try maybe 5 pixels. And part of this is just experimenting and playing. And that's the great thing about computing is that oftentimes when we're doing this, there's no cost in modifying some of these values and trying something new. So feel free to play with this and experiment with it a little bit. And the other thing, just to show what else you could do, there's different styles for the border. So instead of having a solid border, you can have a dotted border. And then you can have a dash border. There are some other styles too where you can have a border that is outset to kind of give it like a 3D look. And so it's very hard to tell, but you'll notice that there's like a little bit of a darker green here, and there's a brighter one there. And then you can have an inset, so almost like it's sunk into the page. And that just kind of reverses those colors. Okay. So you can experiment with those a little bit and then find a color and style that you like. The next thing that we want to do is we actually want to add a list of our songs. So if we want to add a list to our web page, there's a couple of different tags that we can use. If it's an ordered list, we would use an OL tag, which stands for ordered list. But this is going to be an unordered list. So we'll do a UL tag for unordered. So I'm going to do UL. And then in here, I'm going to add some songs. So I'm going to add a coding relaxation song. I'll add a mystery API song. And I'll add a fast like C++ song. Okay, so I'm going to add these here, and you'll notice once we save them, I go back and I refresh, we got our list of songs there. Now, we should probably maybe put like a little header there that kind of shows those songs, or maybe if they're part of an album. So I'm going to add an H3 tag here, and then I'll put on there CS album, and then in parentheses Sonic Pi. Oh, forgot the plus. CS plus album Sonic Pi. So I'll save that, I'll go back and I'll refresh. Okay, so there we see that CS plus album Sonic Pi. I'm going to add a little bit of styling to this though. I want to have maybe an underline here, so we can do that. Now, we looked already at using a tag, using an ID to style things. We can also add a class of styling. So I'm going to do that here in my H3 tag. So I'm going to give it a class, and I'll call it album. The good thing about using classes is that they're really reusable. So you can apply a style regardless of what kind of tag it is or what kind of ID it may have. And you can mix classes. So if you had a class that added styling and you wanted to use another class that added some different styling, I could do something like album and then bold. So if I had two classes that can add both of them there. But I'm just going to leave the album there. And then I'm going to add a class here. And what I want to do for my class selector, this class style here, and note that it starts with a period. That's how we refer to a class. I'm going to change the text decoration. Again, you see a bunch of different styles here. And I'm going to add underline. So if I save that, and go back and I refresh, we see that CS Plus album, Sonic Pi, it's now underlined. So it kind of shows a little bit more emphasis on that. The other thing too is we can change some other attributes about this as well. If we wanted that underline to go all the way across, we could take out that text decoration, and I can specify just to have a border on the bottom. I could give it 1 pixel, make it solid, and then give it the same RGB color as the other ones. So I'm going to do an RGB 200, 200, 200. And you'll notice this will look a little different. It adds it all the way across, and it's a little bit thinner too. We still have that underline on the CS Plus album, so I could take that out. But even though we can add that border bottom there, I'm just going to leave with that text decoration underline there. But if that's something you want to add, you can add that. I can also stretch out the letters in our CS Plus album here, and I can space those out. So I'm going to do letter spacing. And when I specify this, I could do 1.5. And if I go back refresh, you'll notice that that'll space out. It's almost like 1.5 times the spacing. 1 would just be a normal spacing. So if I change it back to 1, it just looks normal. But I'm going to change it to 1.5 and just kind of leave it like that. So it kind of spaces out that album a little bit. So once we have that, we now have an album title. We now have our songs. The next step is to actually get them to play. And that's what we're going to focus on here next.